Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm back on. Hope you all didn't miss me too much. I'm Alec Gabrona, obviously. That's Matt Morrison right there.
I am Matt Morrison, and I hope you all enjoyed that show yesterday. I've been calling it the Mike and Matt, or the Matt and Mike version.
The Eminem broadcast.
The Eminem broadcast.
Yeah. Well, we could do Alec and Matt in the AM.
That would work too.
All right, welcome to the Casual Sports Podcast, though. I'll give you a quick rundown of what we're going in today. Obviously, we know Wednesday, we're talking college football. We're going to unveil our rankings here in just a bit. But we're going to start out high school recap. We're going to talk World Series. Had game one last night. Charlie Morton now dealing with a broken leg. He broke it during the game and continued to pitch, so props to him, but that could impact the World Series a little bit. But, Matt, let's start things off as we always do. Question of the day from yesterday. You did a great job taking the reins. But I'm going to take it from here on out once again, unless I take another day off. So, which Indiana multi-threat quarterback had more than 200 yards, both passing and rushing, in a 2000 game? The answer to that one, Antoine Randall L. So, Matt, you were talking before the show. You guessed him. You were right. And question of the day for today, which school holds the college record for the most consecutive wins? Your options, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma. Leave your answer somewhere. Come on back tomorrow, see if you can get it right. Matt, you got any ideas?
Maybe. It can't be Clemson.
Maybe. I actually do know the answer to this one, so I'm not giving anything away. I knew it before I was reading the question. I'm like, oh, wait, I know this one. Well, I used to play that NCAA video game, so... Yeah, maybe. I used to play that NCAA video game, so you win so many games in a row, you're like, I wonder if I'm closing in on any records. So find out tomorrow though. Matt, we had a pretty fun game this last Friday though. Cheney versus Youngstown East. Obviously the rivalry of Youngstown, one of the big ones we have around, and it's a series that's now been dominated since the return of Cheney football. They're 3-0 since they've returned their football program, and they had a fantastic game, and unfortunately, Cheney's not going to make the playoffs, so we don't get to see, potential return of Hewlett, which they said probably wasn't going to happen, but the dominance of Clive going up against some big-name schools could have been fun, and obviously, he's already a Boston College commit in his junior year. It could have boosted him even further if he got some big plays against, a team like Chardon, who would have been, one of the top seeds. If he could get in there and play some great games, he could go from Boston College to Alabama. He's already committed, but as a junior... that crystal ball sometimes can get a little jostled. You never know what could happen. But Jeff Hadley, a great coach for Boston College, and he's got a great talent coming his way. Cheney won this game 40-8, and Youngstown East didn't really ever stand a chance in this one. But, I think you kind of knew that coming in. Right. I think you kind of knew it coming in, though, with the strength of this Cheney program and that insane defense they have. It was just all over the field, and it's so hard to get anything against guys like Clive Wilson, Tellington. They were just unstoppable on defense, and then they had so many other guys helping as well. It's all the unsung heroes. Everyone wants to talk about Clive and JR, but at the end of the day, they have a lot of other big guys in that line that came in and helped them. Obviously, I think it's every team. They deal with their stars, and the stars get the big hits, the big plays. But it's all the stuff in between you count on to win football games, and Cheney just had more of that. And offensively, it didn't really feel like they could do anything wrong. They were just rolling along, and I think it's something they would love to see with Matt Jones under center. He was all over the place. He broke off some big runs. He had some great deep balls as well. And it's really going to be a bright future coming up next season for Cheney with the return of Hewlett. He's going to return out to wide receiver. And Matt Jones, the freshman quarterback, he's going to take the reins from here on out. So he's got 1 year under his belt, and he started as a true freshman here at Cheney. And can you imagine where this guy can be next season if he works in the offseason with Hewlett, who obviously was playing quarterback to start out the year? So these two, if they can build a great relationship, Matt Jones is another potential Division I candidate going somewhere.
This guy has talent. He's only a freshman. He's just like Christian Davis. The guy had over 200 yards rushing this past game. He can get it done.
And Matt, I think he had over 200 in the game prior as well. So Matt Jones has been on top of things recently. And you got to give credit to him so far in the season for really kind of building the season back up. When a team losing their first game, losing their star quarterback, Cincinnati recruit, you kind of just get that feeling like, oh, it's going to be a wash season. They're bringing in some freshmen. I think Matt Jones, they salvaged the season enough. Obviously, they don't finish with a winning record. They don't make it to the playoffs, but they were there. They got close there at the end, and they were trying to control their own destiny. It just came down. They lost one too many games. If they finished 5-4, we could be in a different story, and they could be in there in the top teams going into the playoffs. The Valley had 22 teams get in, so unfortunately Cheney wasn't one of them. But if you go around to some of the other districts, you got to just look at Youngstown right now, potentially the best place to be playing football in the state of Ohio with the amount of teams that we have in the playoffs now, and with the level of teams in. Because if a team 5-4 and Cheney doesn't get into the playoffs, you go around, you go back to my high school, Division 3, I think it's Region 10, my high school got in with 3 wins. So the fact that we have teams here getting, 4, 5, 6 wins and they're still not making the playoffs, it really speaks volumes to the level of talent we have playing around the Valley right now. So all credit to the teams that have made the playoffs, and we wish you guys the best. Matt, you and I will be taking a Valley up to East Cleveland this week. Cuyahoga Heights hosting Valley Christian. We're going to talk that one Friday before the game. We're going to talk to Andy Hake a little bit, see what the guys are feeling like beforehand. We know it's going to be an intense message down there on the field, that's for sure. But, it should be a fun one, and we'll quickly read off all the teams that did make it to the playoffs here from the Youngstown region. We got Warren Geo Harding, and they get to face off against Austintown Fitch, and what should be a great game for Division 2 and a big game for YSN Live. Canfield made it. Hubbard made it, obviously, for Division 3. In Division 4, we had West Branch, Ursuline, Salem, Poland, Beaver Local, and Girard. South Range made it in Division 5 along with Crestview. Division 6 we had LeBray, Western Reserve, Springfield, and Brookfield, and United. So a lot of big teams making it in for Division 6 in the Valley, and it should be some fun playoff matchups. Our buddy Eric heading down to United for that Brookfield matchup Saturday as well. That should be a great one, I have a feeling. Yes. Brookfield might go and shock some people, but don't count United out. They've played tough all season long, and unfortunately I don't think they got the best game into the season, which would have been against Valley Christian. And you and I were supposed to call that one. Instead, that game gets canceled, and we get Andy Hake on the call for the Mineral Ridge McDonald game. So take it as it is, but it's a great matchup for Division 6 there. In Division 7, Warren JFK made it. Southern is in. Lowellville made it in. Obviously, Valley Christian there, as well as Matthews. So a lot of great schools in. We congratulate everybody that made it, and congratulations to everybody else on finishing out their season. And man, it was wonderful to get a full season of high school football in, wasn't it?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
The cancelizations were so much better than last year. You almost had a pretty even schedule throughout. I think teams knew who they were going to play, and I think it kind of built a better season that, had a lot more consistency. There wasn't question marks almost every other week, so great job to every team staying healthy and giving us a great season here on ysnlive.com. And now we get playoffs, so it gets even better, but it could very quickly go from 22 teams down to 3 or 4 after this week, and that's just the craziness of the playoffs. So
and then right after football ends, basketball starts, and we'll dedicate these days to talking high school basketball. So you'll still hear us talk high school. Don't worry.
Yeah,
it's not going
I'll be
away.
Talking a lot more Liberty and Cardinal Mooney. Those are the two teams I'm covering. Matt, what are the two teams you got for the basketball season?
I'll be covering my alma mater, Joseph Badger, calling the Badger Braves, and then of course, I'm going to be calling the Brookfield Warriors as well too. So.
You guys can look forward to hearing us talking about that one. Matt, though, how about the World Series? Started off last night, and Braves, they played fantastic in this one, took home the game. Why don't you give your analysis? I know you and Mike were talking about this one yesterday, so take it away.
Yeah, Charlie Morton, great start, and then, the bats started going as well here. I didn't get to watch the whole game. I watched most of it, though. 6-2, and this is the best way you want to come off and start this World Series. And you're in Houston, too, and you got to come out and do the same thing tonight as well. Because, Houston's going to come out and battle through this series. You got to get the games in their territory. I think that's important. But Freddie Freeman looking good. The whole team looks good. That's why they're there. And, we still talk about how they only won 88 games on the season. Teams like Seattle and Toronto won 90 games. And now they're sitting at home, and the Braves are sitting in the World Series right now, up 1-0 right now.
Yeah, honestly, great game from the Braves yesterday. Obviously, 2 hits for George Soler. You love the DH get involved. 1 for 3 for Freddie Freeman. So, despite the fact, he didn't have his best game, it really seemed like this was just a total team effort. And obviously 2 for 5 for Rosario, 2 for 5 for Ozzy Albies. It was a great game, but I think the one big takeaway, Charlie Morton, he gets a 102 mile per hour shot off his right fibula in the second inning.
Broke it.
Faced 3 more batters, broke his right leg, and then apologized after. He's apologized, saying, I'm sorry I couldn't go more. I broke my leg. He faced 3 batters. He threw 18 pitches after breaking his fibula, which is one of the worst pains you can experience down in your leg region.
Unbelievable. And the guy's 37 years old. Something like that. He's older. This reminds me.
He still only gave up 1 hit, though, in the 2.1 innings pitch. He walked 3 guys, but at the same time with a broken leg. Or he walked 2 and he struck out 3, so all credit to him, but obviously this is going to hurt, as most likely he's out for the rest of the season and potentially could miss the start of it next year, or at least spring training. Broken legs can take a while to heal, and here, and obviously Cheney fans know that if any of them are watching, with Hewlett being out for the season and potentially missing part of basketball season as well, with his broken leg suffered in game 1 of the season, going back 2.5 months ago. So it's an end for Charlie Morton, and obviously one he's not going to be too happy with. But you look at the rest of the bullpen. After Morton went out in the first 2.1 innings pitched, no one else had a ball until Will Smith down there in the final stand, in which he walked 1 guy. The rest of the bullpen gave up 1 walk and had 8 strikeouts. They allowed 7 hits and 2 runs in, but going up against the Astros lineup, if your bullpen's only allowing 2 runs to come in, just 7 hits, I think you live with that, especially when you expect your starters to go a little bit longer, and obviously the unexpected injury. But if you can go without, and the rest of the series, you have a strong bullpen, they might be a little tired now, but if you can get your starters to now go 5-6 innings, I think they're not going to have any issue pulling the string on taking a starter out, bringing in that bullpen, because they saw what they did there in game 1.
Especially with the likes of A.J. Minter and Tyler Matzik in their bullpen. And then you have Will Smith as a closer.
Right.
And, you notice I didn't really mention a name there, but Jackson came in and got 3 strikeouts. He had a very shaky NLCS. I think this is his opportunity to shine here. He has to bounce back, because, they're going to really have to rely on the bullpen now. You're not going to get Morton for a second game.
Which I think just builds on the fact they have to close the series out early. If this one goes 7, the loss to Morton could be the deciding factor. You don't want to put it all on one player, but when you have to rely on pitching so much against a strong lineup, you look at pitching last night for the Braves. They held Jose Altuve for an 0 for 5 night. Bregman 0 for 4. Carlos Correa 0 for 3. He did get walked, but a great night. They also got McCormick 0 for 3. Maldonado 0 for 2, and Jason Castro 0 for 2 as well. So a lot of great pitching, and they really held this lineup in check. And that's kind of what we were talking about on Monday's show. And could the Braves bullpen keep this lineup quiet? And I think they answered that one here in game 1. They couldn't keep it quiet, and they did. And now the rest of the questions that we came into: could the Braves hit enough? Could they get, runs that weren't just making it a one-run ball game? Could they build a lead? Could they not stress the bullpen out? They did it all perfectly. They answered every question we asked on Monday in game 1 of the series. So now the question is, can they continue to do that in games 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, that's a big question to answer there. You got a good matchup tonight. Fried, this is the kid that has to bounce back. He didn't really have that strongest start. That last time he played, against the Dodgers, they lit him up pretty good. But I think he has to have a good, solid start. Like you said, 5-6 innings, and then come on, bring the bullpen in. They're going up against Jose Urquidy. That's who's on the mound for the Astros, and he's been okay. He's not the best pitcher, but he's not the worst pitcher. So, with the lineup what the Braves have, they should take advantage of this, but you never know. Playoff World Series play is very different. We've seen different versions of Tom Brady. In the regular season he looks horrible sometimes, but then it's all shut down in the playoffs, so you never really know.
And, this was a great game for the Major League Baseball as well. You go look at their stats, and you saw last year's World Series. They were down in viewership. It kind of seemed like, Matt, we had a show last year, The Death of Baseball, that we put up on our YouTube channel. We were talking about just the ratings going down. Well, this year they saw a huge jump in ratings. They got a 2.3 rating for the Nelson affiliates. 10.10 million views, up from last year where they had a 1.8 rating with only 7.22 million people watching between the Dodgers and Tampa Bay. So despite the fact we don't have the big names in, we're getting a lot more viewership. And when you can talk about getting an extra 3 million people to watch the first game of your World Series here with, two teams that obviously Atlanta, they have a big group behind them. They got the whole city, and I think that's where they're going to pull a lot of people. But it's still not Los Angeles. It's not Tampa Bay. This is Houston and Atlanta, two teams that, in the southern part of the United States, you're losing basically the entire northern, side of baseball that normally watches, just like they did last year, and I think that's why they saw the drop last year. But people want baseball, Matt.
People want baseball. I want baseball, man.
And you know what? If people want more baseball, come on back in a few months after basketball season here on YSNLive.com. We got lots of baseball.
We got lots of baseball.
There was so much baseball last year, and hopefully more, some better schedules coming out the next few months here for that as well. So, Matt, let's get on out of the World Series talk. Game 2, obviously tonight, should be a great one. I took the Braves in 5. My pick's standing up right now if that bullpen stays strong. So, Matt, let's go ahead and do what I think my favorite part of this show is every week. Top 25 rankings here, our top 10s that we do on the show. First, we'll read it off the AP, then we'll get into ours. Sitting at number 10 in the AP, Ole Miss, Iowa at 9, Michigan State at 8, Oregon at 7, Michigan at 6, Ohio State sits at number 5. At number 4, Oklahoma, 3 is Alabama, 2 Cincinnati, number 1 is Georgia. And Matt, I'm kind of still on the outside looking in here of me having Alabama down a little bit more than 3, and actually I completely dropped Oklahoma out of my top 5. Out of my top 4. They just haven't looked impressive, and their young quarterback came in. I haven't seen any consistency from them, despite the fact they're undefeated. They nearly lost to Kansas. So as we get into ours here, some big teams back in there. Obviously, Ole Miss finding their way, creeping back in. I didn't have them at number in my rankings. You and Mike both had them at 9, so they did make ours. But I had Wake Forest sneaking back in there, despite the fact that they gave up 56. You have to look at them. They're undefeated. They're 7-0 in the ACC. It was a terrible game against Army, 70-56, but they still won, and they've been winning. And right now, I think you have to at least give the ACC some credit, because if we're talking Clemson doing the same thing, they'd be sitting right up there at number 2 in the country right now. So I think it's time to give credit to teams like Pitt and Wake Forest. I had Wake Forest at number 10 for that exact reason. But the number 10 for the Casual Sports Podcast, Wake Forest, did not make the cut. Our number 10 team went to Ole Miss, so the Rebels getting into our top 10. It's not like it matters, but it's still fun to get into. Yeah. I didn't have them in my top 10. I'm still waiting for them to make their comeback. I'm liking what Matt Corral did, but I just didn't think it was a strong performance in that game. Obviously, they had Eli Manning night. I expected them to win, but it's not been impressive enough for me so far to want to put them back up in there. They won by 14 points against the struggling LSU Tigers. I think I'm still waiting for that big jump from Ole Miss.
Yeah,
and we're gonna see that. We're gonna talk about their game this coming weekend. They are in Auburn for a big one, their top 25 matchup. So if they win that one, they'll probably be back in my top 10. But at the moment, they're still on the outside looking in. What's your thought on Ole Miss right now?
Ole Miss, they're clicking. I think they were pretty mad against the garbage game, Tennessee garbage game, and they came out and, they really showed something. They don't like to get thrown. They don't like garbage thrown at them.
I don't think anybody does, Matt.
No. So they came out, and of course, Arch Manning was there too. You gotta look good when that kid's there. Hey, we want you to come here.
Right. I think they had a strong performance, but I'm still waiting for this weekend. This weekend, I think, tells a lot to me on the state of Ole Miss football. We'll talk more about that LSU game here later on. Let's move in. Number 9 now on our rankings. I had them sitting at 8. You and Mike had them both at 10. It evened them out. Sitting at number 9, Iowa football. Coming off the bye, I didn't really see a reason to move them here. Apparently neither did you. I had them fall back to 8 just based on the fact that I wanted to move some teams up, and obviously Penn State falls out. But I kind of kept them solid bye week. I don't want to drop them. We'll see how they respond. What are your thoughts and feelings right now on Iowa?
Iowa, they had a fluke game. They barely got past Penn State, and now that's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's looking like a bad win because, of course, Well,
I don't want to go so far to say that's a bad win over Penn State. But Penn State was still a top 4 team. They're still a top 15 team or top 25 team. They fell back to 20th now in the rankings, I believe. 20th, which I think is a bit nonsense.
It is, but
they lose a close game and they get thrown back. It's like if that happens to a team like A&M, which it has, they drop back 5 spots, and now you get Penn State dropping back 15 with 2 losses.
I don't think they like the Big Ten very much, but
I think you can see it this season that
you've seen it.
This season alone, I think you can see it with Iowa losing. They get kicked in the butt. Ohio State fell out of the top 10 after they lost. Even the fact that they lost by 7 points to an Oregon team that's lost once and sits at number 7 in the AP poll, and yet Ohio State doesn't seem to want to get any respect from anyone, despite the fact that they have the number 1 offense in the country and have blown out their last 4 opponents.
Yeah.
Which, granted, they're not great opponents, and I admit that as a Buckeye fan.
They're still beating them.
But they're doing what they're supposed to. You get the schedule you get handed from your conference, and you do what you can with that. Ohio State has done that. Iowa has done that. Penn State, for the most part, has done that. Michigan has done that. Michigan State has done that. If this was SEC football, and we're talking right now that they have, 4 undefeated teams, or, 2 undefeated teams and, 3 one-loss teams, those teams would all be in the top 10, and probably 3 of them in the top 5.
Yeah.
The clear disrespect to the Big Ten Conference right now. Really and I don't think anyone can really say there isn't. I don't think anyone can say there isn't when Alabama lost to an unranked team and fell to 6th and now is already back in the top 4 in 2 weeks' time. Nonsense.
It's abysmal.
It is. And, we've said a lot about it on the show that I don't think Alabama deserves that high of a ranking. I have them sitting at 4th. I have them sitting at 4th. I don't think they should be 3 already.
You see where I put them?
Yeah, you still have them at 7th, and I respect that. Yeah. Granted, I don't think the teams ahead of them are better than them, but, they've done what they had to. And
they've done what they had to. They've won every game. They don't lose the bad teams.
That's for sure. And next up, on the 8th spot, I had them sitting at 7. You and Mike both at 8. You and Mike were pretty clear and set for this bottom 3. Michigan State, they just keep rolling along. Nothing about them is impressive. Nothing about them is, too bad, though. They've just kind of been sitting there waiting for something to happen. And they obviously were coming off the bye week, and they got Michigan at home this Saturday. So that should be a great game. We're going to preview that one tomorrow. And I think it's going to start telling out very quickly who the best teams in the Big Ten are here in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it starts with this week.
Yeah, and you got to expect Kenneth Walker to have a big game and Peyton Thorne to go right along with them. Any other thoughts on Michigan State there, Matt?
I mean, I definitely agree with you. They look... They're up 1 week. I mean, they're not up and down the next week. They're consistent. They're very consistent.
They're consistently above average, but they're not. I wouldn't say they're good, but I wouldn't say they're great either. They just seem above average, and they find ways to win. It's one of those teams that I don't think anybody really wants to play because they just find a way to beat you. They don't do it impressively. No, nothing about them is like, oh, that's a great team right there. It's like, this team should probably be 0-5 instead, 5-0. It's one of those teams, every game is close for them, so it'll be fun here against Michigan, and will probably be a low-scoring crapshoot.
Yeah. I like what Mel Tucker's doing with them. He's got his strategy down, just to get them in the winning section, and that's what they've been doing.
Well, they're right up in there.
It's not ugly.
Another team we have sitting in that top 10, then we're going to go into the number 7 spot. You and Mike both had them up there in the top 6. I still had them back at 9. I haven't been impressed, even despite the win against UCLA, Oregon. They're making their way back in the rankings, and obviously if they win the Pac-12, they're in the college football playoffs so long as they don't lose again. But it was a 7-point win against an unranked team, and if we look at any other team in the country, say Ohio State, they went in there against Rutgers, who was sitting on the edge of the top 25 with 1 loss on the season at that point. Mm-hmm. If Ohio State had lost there, they get kicked in the nuts and out of the top 20 like Penn State did. Instead, you get a 7-point win here. Nothing about it was impressive for Oregon. And I've been a UCLA fan all this season. I've really liked what they've been doing, and I've been riding their high, and I tried to keep them up as long as possible. But at the same time, they don't have any consistency there. They can't win football games, and that's a game UCLA should have won. And at the end of it, I don't think Oregon should be sitting this high in the rankings, but that's my part. Where are you thinking this one? Mike obviously not here to give his opinion. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, but, I mean... First of all, I didn't really like their uniforms. I just gotta put that.
Those uniforms are awful. It looked like bird poop. It was bird poop. I don't. They wanted to say it was like they wanted to say eggshell. And I'm like, have you ever seen an eggshell? They're either brown or perfectly white. I've never seen those speckled eggshells. I don't know what kind of ducks they're going for.
Yeah, but I mean, a huge loss for them was, of course, their
cookies and cream uniform.
Yeah. Ooh, I could go for some cookies and cream.
Handle's right up the street. Let's go. Oh, no, he's leaving the show. All right. Give your thoughts here on Oregon, though.
Yeah, but, I mean, they're still winning games. They don't have they don't have their star player. I mean, their running back went down. I mean, you still got to give it to them. They're winning games. They're not pretty wins, but they're winning. So that's why I kind of had to keep them in there, If they lose one game, they're going to plummet, though.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, if they take another
loss.
Just
like your team, the Chanticleers, sitting at 13-14 every week, take one loss, and they drop them. Almost nearly out.
Yeah, they took a hard loss there, and I was like, that's unfortunate. I mean, you look at Oregon, the rest of the season, it should be a pretty fun ride for them. They got Colorado. It should be a win game. Washington's always tough on the road, especially in November. They'll get Washington State at home. Then they head out to Utah, which I think is the one big game they have left before they finish out the season hosting Oregon State. And then they'll most likely go to take on Arizona State in the Pac-12 championship as it sits at the moment. So it's a pretty easy ride right now for Oregon, but they can't afford another slip-up like they have against Stanford. And they've now barely won their last three, or they've barely won their last two after losing that 7-point game in overtime to Stanford. They win by 7 points against Cal, who has one win on the season. They win by 3 points against the 5-3 Bruins. So I haven't been impressed enough with them. Got to do more, in my opinion. But now, next up on the list, sitting in at number 6, that team up north, Matt, Michigan. They got their big game coming in, but obviously they're undefeated. So long as they stay undefeated, they're going to be right up in there. They're another Big Ten team that I haven't been overly impressed with, but they've done just enough. So I think at the moment, I can't say anything bad against them as much as I would love to say tons of bad stuff. They're sitting there and we're waiting. It's a waiting game, and obviously Michigan State this weekend, it's going to tell us what we have out of either one of these teams, and it's going to send one team up, one team down.
Yeah, and I mean, where is that game? Is it in?
It's in East Lansing. East Lansing.
East Lansing? All right. Yeah.
Up there in Sparty country.
Right down the road.
Right.
But
they are like, what, 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from each other, I think?
Like
Ann Arbor and East Lansing, I don't think go that far.
No.
And then Toledo's right down the road, too.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 hours that separate the three schools. Not that Toledo's good at football, but that's besides the point.
You just had to throw that in there. Yeah.
Gotta throw Ohio.
That's how close they are. That's how close they are. And that's why we don't like them at all. But,
all right, Matt, any more thoughts on Michigan here before we hit our top 5?
No.
All right, fair enough. All right, sitting in here at number 5, it's where I had them. You and Mike both had them sitting at number 4, Oklahoma, the Sooners. I kind of said it before. I haven't been impressed with them despite the fact they're undefeated. I view Oklahoma the same way I view Wake Forest. They're not good at football, but they win. They win.
And
I dropped them out of the top 5 because I think other teams are better, and I think other teams have played more competitive games, and if they haven't played competitive, they've blown out their opponents, allowing a game that they nearly lose to Kansas. I think it has to affect you in the rankings, and that's what I showed here in this game.
Their quarterback,
you can't nearly lose to Kansas and want to be in a top 4 team. Granted, they pulled away and they won, and you give them credit for that, but it was embarrassing.
Their quarterback saved their game. That guy stripping the ball. I think we talked about this, but he stripped the ball from one of his own players and took off. And I don't know if he scored, but it sure is.
He didn't score. He got 2 yards.
But it still saved them, I think. I think it got him a first down or something.
It did, and it was able to slow the game out. I mean, it was a 12-point win against Kansas, and I don't see anything from Oklahoma right now that says they're a top 4 team in the country. I think we have better teams to pick from, and that's what our college playoff ranking shows here show.
But plays like that really show that this guy needs
he
to
wants
be
to
at
win.
The helm. Yeah, he needs to be at the helm, not Spencer Rattler.
Right.
He needs to rattle on out of here,
Well, he's going to take that rattle. He's hitting the transfer portal most likely this offseason, though. So now, Matt, we're going to hit our top 4. Why don't we go 1 to 4 here? Georgia takes our number 1 ranking, and it's still unanimous right now. I was almost a flip, though. They're still good. But I think we got some other teams potentially fighting for that number 1 spot here shortly. Cincinnati at number 2, they survived their fluke. I dropped them down to 3, respectively because of it. They, one possession game against Navy. you have to take every week as it stands. I don't want to look too far back. I don't want to look too far forward. It's what do you have right here, right now, and that's how I'm kind of viewing my rankings as we're putting them together. And at the moment, Cincinnati, they survived their fluke game, Matt, so now it's just win out. But you're going up against a Navy team. It was the same thing from Army-Navy in the same week. Neither team knows how to throw the football or really have any offense at all. You go to the Army-Navy game these last, 4 years, and it's been absolutely just awful to watch when they try and throw the football. And now both games, it just seemed like, oh, why do these two teams have offense here? Congratulations to the military schools, and we love them, obviously. I know you and I are both Navy fans. We'll take Navy every time to go up against Army.
Absolutely. I almost joined the Navy. I was about to go and join it, but that's not really relevant. But that's how much I like the Navy,
Right, but at the same, so we're not trying to dog on them basically what we're saying, but they traditionally have not had any sorts of offense, and even on the season, they really haven't been great. They both win football games just fine, but they're never great teams that put, massive efforts on the field, and they're not supposed to. They're military schools, and that's fine. We respect that. But Cincinnati is supposed to be a number 2 team in the country. Number 2 team in the country doesn't have a game like that. So I showed that in my rankings. I dropped them down to number 3, and but they still stayed strong at number 2 for both you and Mike.
Yeah, I like this fighting fickle Cincinnati team, and I like Desmond Ridder, and I know you do too. I think they're there for a reason. I think they're going to stay. Even if they had a fluke game, everybody has a fluke game. And they survived it, and they've been up there all year. And I'm gonna keep them there until I have the right to move them. So that's all. Yeah, they're a good team. I like them.
Fair enough.
I think they can go far. So.
Yep. Well. We'll see right here our final 3 and 4 teams. I think this is the real toss-up, right? Alabama and Ohio State. Who takes the 3? Who takes the 4? In my personal rankings, actually, I had Ohio State at number 2. Considering the fact they're the number 1 offense in the country, they've dominated everybody, and you look at their defense, point the camera that way, but if you look at their defense right now, they've allowed, 3 touchdowns in the last 3 games? They've been dominating as much as Georgia against opponents they were supposed to dominate against, and they've done that nearly perfectly. So I think right now, Ohio State has taken care of business every time. They've taken care of the spread. They've blown opponents out early. They've taken their starters out in the fourth to start out the fourth quarter. So we're getting guys like C.J. Stroud playing 3 quarters and putting up Heisman numbers. Ohio State is that team. And, Mike wants to keep throwing disrespect on their name. He has them sitting at 6th behind Oregon, in which I was just like, he's salty from the Penn State win. He's salty. You have to say it.
Yeah. He is.
Putting them at 6, and I don't think Ohio State's supposed to be back at 6 there. He actually drops them from 5 to 6 here in the weeks, and I don't see any reason to put Oregon above them besides the fact he just does not like Ohio State.
No, he doesn't. He hates them.
Yeah, he does.
I'm not the biggest fan either, but Penn State's my team, but sometimes you just have to admit the truth sometimes.
Yeah, and this was a close battle here between Alabama and Ohio State. So Alabama taking the 3 spot. Ohio State sits at 4 in our rankings. I had Ohio State at 2. You had them at 3, and then he has them at 6. Alabama, I had sitting at 4. He had Alabama at 3, and you had Alabama at 7. So it was right there in the mix, and a better ranking from either you with Alabama or him with Ohio State, and it could have completely flipped that one around and would have changed up. So it's still a toss-up between those two. But I love what I've seen out of Ohio State these last few weeks. And I know everyone wants to say, quality wins. They haven't faced anybody yet. Yeah, a lot of people haven't faced. Wake Forest hasn't faced anybody, and obviously they're not in the rankings. Oregon has the 1 win against Ohio State by 7 points, which is also Ohio State's only losses by 7 points to a number 7 team. And to me, that's reason number 1 why I have Ohio State over Alabama. Alabama's 1 loss, unranked.
A&M.
Obviously, A&M ranked now. Give credit there to A&M for doing their job and winning football games, pulling the upset. But Ohio State loses by 7 to a top 10 team. That is why I have them sitting higher than Alabama in these rankings, and I'm sure you have a similar rationale for that one. But how can you look at Ohio State and say they're not the best team in the country, at least offensively? Defense, there's still some question marks, and we'll see how they play against Penn State this coming weekend. But Penn State hasn't shown any offense much either, so it's a game that we're going to preview Thursday that it might end up being a big win for Ohio State. And I think, number 1, if Ohio State beats Penn State here this weekend, and it's a large margin, undoubtedly we should all have them inside the top 4.
Oh, absolutely. And
I mean, I don't know how you could say if they do win against a top 25 team that you can't move them up because they've done everything else. If they blow out a top 25 team, then you have to give them the respect they earn.
And I want to touch on this real quick. I mean, we don't like Michigan. We can't stand them. I mean, we barely say Michigan. We just say the team up north. And we still move them up. If teams deserve to be moved up, we're going to move them up. And that goes with Alabama, too. I don't think they deserve to be moved up.
I've never been a fan of Alabama. They beat Ohio State in the playoffs or in the championship last year. So, I don't want them there, but at the same time, I put them at number 4 because they've earned that right to be at number 4 so far in the season. I try and take bias out of this and just say, who do I think, honestly, deserves those spots based on what they've done? I don't know how you guys put them together. That's how I put mine in there. So... But that's our top 10. Ole Miss, Iowa, MSU, Oregon, Michigan, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama, Cincinnati, and Georgia still standing strong here. Matt, let's move it into some of these games. We talked a little bit about this one already. Wake Forest, Demon Deacon, 70-56 against the Army Black Knights. Sam Hartman was fantastic, 23 of 29, 458 yards and 5 touchdowns to his name in that ball game. And I love Sam Hartman right now for Wake Forest. He is leading the charge, and I know there's a lot of hype about Kenny Pickett. Sam Hartman's right there with him in the ACC. Pickett and Hartman right now are the two best quarterbacks in the ACC, and you have to also look at Emory Jones, Louisville. He's got a big ride coming up. Obviously, the team's still down, but Lamar Jackson was down when he was great, and the team still was down. So Louisville has other issues than the quarterback. I love Emory Jones, and ACC's got a few big guys coming up here that could potentially make their way into the NFL very soon. I think Sam Hartman's one of those guys to do it. On the other side, though, it was 9 of 11 night for Jabari Laws. He had 140 yards, 3 touchdowns in the ground game. Very evident they are over 300 yards on the ground. They put up 56 points of offense, and it was just incredible. And actually, Army was at 416 rushing yards in this game. And what more can you say about Army? Just somehow finding a way to compete in this. But I was talking to my roommates before this game, and I was just like, can you imagine being an offensive coordinator in that Monday meeting and just went, I put up 56 points, and we still lose by 14 points! The military has an $800 trillion... No, the military has an $800 trillion, spending budget, and they allow 70 points in a game!
Get down and give me 20 on your knuckles!
I mean, could you imagine being that offensive coordinator and you're just like, I gave you 400 yards rushing, we had a perfect day through the air, in my defense, your defense, not my defense, my offense did their job, your defense let up 70 points? You couldn't get anything done defensively. I mean, it was touchdown, 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 touchdown. Couldn't do anything wrong. 10 touchdowns for Wake Forest. Not to mention 42 points in the second half. It was just a phenomenal game from Wake Forest side offensively. No defense to speak of. This was a Big 12 football game, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Offense.
Offense. That's all it was.
Defense? No. Offense wins championships.
Defense? Who's she? I ain't never met no defense.
Offense wins championships in the Pac-12.
Matt, this is the ACC.
Oh, my bad. ACC. Well, I mean, them too.
Yeah, right. All right, here. Next game up, Wisconsin, Purdue Boilermakers. It was another one of those just, fun games to look at. Potential, big game for Purdue if they wanted to stay in the top 25. They don't. They lose 30-13, and that's just making Penn State's game look a heck of a lot, or Iowa's game a heck of a lot worse against this squad. They lost 24-7. Now this team gets blown out by 27 against Wisconsin. Graham Mertz passed the ball 8 times. They went 5 for 8 for 52 yards. The rest of it came on the ground. 290 rushing yards for Wisconsin, just 52 passing. And then you look at the other side defensively for Wisconsin. They held Purdue to negative 13 rushing yards in this game. How often can you say a defense held someone to negative yards, on the ground? It's not too often.
It's Wisconsin defense. I mean, they have been tough. They have produced, great defensive players. TJ Watt. Yeah. But even Loudermilk, they had a big guy named Loudermilk that was good too. I mean, they have tough defenses. And
I think there's one thing you got to take away from that. There's one thing I think you got to take away from it. Potentially, you can throw a team on upset alert in Iowa this week.
Farm boys.
Iowa versus Wisconsin might end up being a huge upset this week, and I'm actually going to add it to our schedule to talk about tomorrow. So make sure you tune in tomorrow. I mean, Wisconsin's played terrible against big-name teams, but they've won everything else. Uh-oh, he's got my bell out there. But, congrats to Wisconsin picking up the win. They sit at 4-3, and if they beat Iowa, they're going to be in the top 25, much like Purdue was there. So control your destiny. We'll see what happens. I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done without, any sort of passing attack to at least spread out the Iowa defense, but we'll get in that one tomorrow. Oregon, UCLA, we obviously touched on this a little bit already. 34-31, the Ducks take home the win here. Anthony Brown, terrible passing day. He threw 2 interceptions, but he did, completion-wise and yards-wise, he was fine. But if you can't find the end zone through the air, it's hard to say you'd had a good day as a quarterback because kind of your job to find the end zone that way. 29-39 for him, 296 yards. On the ground, though, Anthony Brown, he was all right in that category. 85 yards on 6 carries, a touchdown for him on the ground. And they used Travis Dye a lot in the red zone, so Anthony Brown was getting it down there. But then on just 14 carries and 35 yards, Travis Dye, 4 touchdowns. So goal line offense was apparently the top of the list here for Oregon for Travis Dye without C.J. Verdell to really carry the load. So perhaps it's just what we see out of Oregon's offense from here on out, them pushing it all the way down to the line through the air and then running it in with Travis Dye, who's a great power back, and you see it right there, what's that, 33% of his touchdowns, 33% of his carries turn into touchdowns, pretty good conversion rate.
Pretty good, and I've touched on this before. Even though they don't have their star running back, and it's always next man up. And Oregon produces good running backs. They've been known to do this for years. So just next man up.
Yeah, you got to play next man. If you are a top 10 team, it is next man up. Yeah, Matt, as you're saying there, if you're a top 10 team, you have to have that next man up mentality because season's not over if one guy goes down, and that's how you separate yourself from being a top 10 team to be a top 20 team. That is the real difference in why you see a team like Alabama, Ohio State, Iowa, they lose, they don't fall out because they have the next guy. You go back to the very first college football playoff, and Ohio State very easily could have fallen out of the top 10 with the loss of JT Barrett there in the Michigan game, but the committee gave them the benefit of the doubt, knowing that they had the next guy to step up, and they did, and they win the championship because of it. So it is next man up mentality. You saw that from Alabama last year. Jalen Waddle missed a good part of the season injured. He comes back in the championship game, but they had the pieces afterwards to go to the next guy. Clemson last season when Trevor Lawrence went down for a game, DJ stepped up. He hasn't played great this season, but he played great then. Penn State, obviously, when Sean Clifford went down the game prior to the Illinois one, you had another guy come in, and he didn't play great, but it was next man up, and they had to live with what they had. Yeah, Robertson, he played fine. He played fine for the position he got in, but it's always that next man up, so we'll have to see what happens throughout the rest of the season with Oregon. It's going to be a tough ride here, but another team that's got a tough ride, to try and go anywhere, Oklahoma State now 6-1. They lose to the now number 22 ranked Iowa State, who sits at 5-2. And this was just a slugfest back and forth, man. It was tough physical football.
Controversial calls too.
Yeah, it always happens when you get down to close games. But Matt, that's something you and I always talk about when we're on the broadcast. If you're going to be upset about a ref's call, don't let them control the game. Don't put your team in a position where the refs can decide the outcome. And that's kind of where we've stood on a lot of games we've called this season. I think it's the same one here. Even with Penn State, Indiana last season, it was fine. You don't want the refs to be the one to make the call. Don't put your team in the position to make that call. Win early. And this was just one of those games where neither team could take control, and it came down to a moment, and refs make a call, and it changes. Potentially could have changed the outcome. But as it stands, Oklahoma State takes their first loss of the season. They're still up there. They have the chance now. They sit at third place in the Big 12, so they're on the outside looking in. And it's going to take a perfect season to finish it off for Oklahoma State. We'll see if they can get there. I'm looking forward to the rest of the ride. They got Kansas, WVU, TCU, Texas Tech, and then Oklahoma to finish off the season. They could pull off the upset of the year, and I think they'd be the team to do it if they can take down OK State.
Yes, absolutely.
Or pardon me, if they can take down OK.
Yeah, okay.
OK takes on OK State. Okay.
Okay.
But obviously, all credit here to Iowa State on their end. Brock Purdy, 27 of 33, 307 yards, 2 touchdowns. And Matt, this is a guy beginning this first few games out of the season. He's getting a lot of hype, potentially getting taken up there in the top 15 as quarterbacks for the NFL draft. A lot of talk potential, him and Matt Corral, both to the Steelers already as they're looking for their next quarterback. And you were kind of sounding like, man, this guy doesn't look NFL ready. This was a game I think he really turned things around, and it could lead to a strong second half of the season now.
Yeah, absolutely. Brock Purdy, showing that he's pretty good.
Darn, took my line there, Matt.
Oh, man.
I'm always the one with the puns there, and you're taking it. Darn. You beat me to it. I'll give you credit.
He went and battled, Corral, and won,
That he did. You got to give credit. So, next game up,
yeah,
Ole Miss. The Rebels taking down the Tigers by 14 points. And I think just brief moment, we'll take a step aside. Matt Corral, 185 yards and touchdown. Didn't have a great game. It was their rushing game once again that came out and played big. Jared Connor, 117 yards. Jerrion Ely, 97 yards. And then obviously Paris Jr. had 32 and a touchdown, along with Corral getting 24 of his own. It's just a team that so far looks like they're being led by their rush game. And they're going to need that to continue to be strong if they want to have any chance of pushing this one down the slate, because they are right behind Alabama in the SEC rankings. And obviously they lost. They lost by 21 to Alabama, so they are hoping for an Alabama loss. But if Ole Miss wins out and Alabama loses one, slips up somewhere along the way, Ole Miss is now in the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
So it's a win-out mentality, and they have Auburn this weekend. That'll be tough. They get to take on Liberty University, which should be an easy win for them. Then they get another top 25 matchup in A&M before they host Vanderbilt. Then they finish off the season against an always tough Mississippi State.
Yes, absolutely. I guess some breaking news here.
Go ahead.
Have to say this. The Cleveland Guardians just got sued by a Cleveland roller derby team.
I knew it.
Alleges trademark infringement, claiming ownership of the Guardians' name since 2014. They just got sued. So, back to the Indians.
Yeah, so they're going to have to find a new team. There cannot be two Cleveland Guardian franchises in the city. As I pull up the Fox 8 article here, I guess as I'm reading through this, trying to see something going on here.
Did you see the look in my eyes?
Yeah, I did. You were happy.
Oh, God. Oh, man. Yeah, go ahead and talk about that, but... Whew. I totally forgot what we were talking about.
Doesn't matter. LSU 4-4 in the season. It's the end of the Edo era. They have Alabama here after their bye week, so it'll be a tough game coming up for them, and they'll have Arkansas after that, L.A. Monroe after that, and then they finish off the season hosting A&M. So it's a tough ride out for the LSU Tigers, but we'll see if Edo can ride off into the sunset with a big bowl game. I mean, they could finish 8-4. It would take a lot to get to 8-4, but they could do it, and you could see what happens. But you just hope they can at least pull off two. They'll get one with L.A. Monroe, so it's a matter of getting the others.
Yep, that is true.
All right, next game on our slate, we'll briefly talk Cincinnati here. They win with 7-point win over the 1-6 Navy midshipmen. Desmond Ridder lost any chance of getting to the Heisman. He's officially out of the race. And it just one of those games again. 192 rushing yards for Navy, 116 passing, which isn't something you can ever say out of them. Ty Levitai went 11 of 15, 116 yards. He threw an interception. All two touchdowns came on the ground for them, and they had another touchdown somewhere. Trying to find it. No, they kicked that their way to 20 points. So 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals. It just wasn't the right game for Cincinnati. The defense played fine. The offense has to be better. And you look at Desmond Ridder, 18 of 30, 176 yards, 2 touchdowns, an interception. He was only get 6 yards on the ground. Jerome Ford only had 90 yards and a touchdown. It just didn't feel like the same Cincinnati we've seen all season. No. The defense played, pretty good. They need to play better. Just 1 sack in this game. They couldn't force an interception on one of the worst passing offenses in, college football history. Joel DeBlanco had 9 tackles. Curtis Brooks with 7. So, they're getting a lot of big plays, and you got to give Darian Beavers 11 assisted tackles in this game. So, credit there. But this just isn't the same Cincinnati we're used to seeing, Matt.
No. But, you got to give credit. They still, picked up the win, even if it was a sloppy win. We touch on
survived the fluke.
They survived the fluke that I touched on this earlier. That's why I kept them in that spot. Hey, they're winning, so they're staying. I really like what Luke Fickell has done there. He's really turned that program around.
Yeah.
And I just, it happens. Fluke games happen.
But I dropped them, same reason I dropped Oklahoma. Yeah. Kansas is a 1-win team, nearly pulls the upset, and Navy got closer, so I had to move them down. If I'm going to treat Oklahoma that way, I got to treat my Cincinnati team that way. And Cincinnati, they still have a strong chance of winning out. They got Tulane, Tulsa, USF, and ECU, but you got to keep the eyes on the SMU Mustangs. That's the one big game left, and Tulane's been rolling along. They also had a 7-point win against Navy, so against similar opponents, the schedules are pretty even there already. They just beat Tulane by 30, so we'll see what Cincinnati's response to that one is this weekend. It could be a big win for Cincy, and right now it's come down on the American, SMU and the Bearcats.
Yes,
it's looking like the head-to-head everyone's looking for, and SMU has the chance to really pull off the biggest group of 5 upset, at least on the season, and it would throw it would turn college football upside down, I think, if you drop Cincinnati out, because Cincinnati at the moment has the chance to be the first group of 5 team to ever make the college football playoffs. So, but let's step in here, one more game to talk about, and then we'll look into the NBA a little bit. Oklahoma Sooners against the Jayhawks, and we kind of mentioned this one a little bit earlier, but Caleb Williams, 15 to 20, 178 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Average, right? Average game, nothing impressive, nothing bad. Kennedy Brooks.
Everything is average.
Right. Kennedy Brooks really couldn't get anything going either on the ground, just 3.3 yards per carry. He did get 2 touchdowns, so give credit there. Trevon West broke off a big one for 66 yards on the ground, and Caleb Williams, 8.8 yards per carry, had 70 yards on the ground for him. So it was balanced, but you just aren't seeing anything out of this team. Just 1 sack. Same thing I mentioned out of Cincinnati. Just 1 sack against a 1-win team on the season. You have to play better in these games, and that's where you look at teams like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. When they're in these games against 1-win teams, they do what they're supposed to, and they win big. I mean, you look Ohio State versus Indiana, we had to talk about it because obviously Indiana nearly pulled the upset on Michigan State, and they almost had one against Michigan as well, so you had to look at that one. If we predicted 52-7, and they win it, well, I predicted 52-7 knowing they should blow them out, but this could potentially be their fluke game. They won 54-7 instead. You take care of business. Alabama does it most of the time. They didn't do it against A&M, but they do it most of the time against unranked teams. Georgia has obviously been dominating teams this season. You have to win these sort of games, and you have to win them big, and that's the number one reason I don't have Cincinnati and Oklahoma looking great right now. They did not impress me when they didn't need to. They didn't need to, look impressive in these games. They didn't need to do anything. They're undefeated. They get their spot so long as they win out. But at the same time, when you go playoff committee and you see the uncertainness from them sometimes, you don't know which way they're going to go. It really feels like a situation you have to win these big games, especially if it comes down to a point. Oklahoma loses final week of the season to Oklahoma State. You never know what can then happen. Then you look back at a game like this. They won by 12 points against Kansas. Maybe I'm not going to put them in the playoff. Because it's a team that traditionally in the playoffs, they've been blown out every time they've been put in there. So I think a committee right now sees a 12-point game against Kansas. They might be, pretty wary to put them back in.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the history that you just touched on. When you have a horrible game like that, when we just touched on it, I mean, it's horrible. I mean, you got to beat teams like Kansas. Kansas is a basketball school, okay? They don't even belong in the same conversation when you talk football, and they almost beat Oklahoma, and they don't impress me.
Right. All right, let's move it on here. College football, 6 minutes left in the show before Power Hour next year on ysnlive.com. We'll take it 3 to 4. Then, a lot of sports on as well, so make sure to check it out. But in the NBA, Knicks now 3-1 on the season. They continue to impress. They win by 13 over the 76ers. Obviously, Philly's got their own problems to deal with, and they're looking for a strong rest. Obviously a long way to go. Just 78 games left on your schedule, only 4 down, so long way to go. But I think right now they're just a team that's looking for something, and they haven't really found it. On the other hand, Golden State Warriors now at 4-0. They continue just to be great, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with the Thunder, he had 30 points in this game. They almost, win this game. They just lose by 8 down to the stretch, and when you're going up against the Warriors, if you can push it close, you give yourself a chance, but obviously they're just so good at closing out big games like this in Golden State that they were able to take it away. But I think you have to give credit, and I know we all kind of said this was probably going to be the worst team in basketball this year, and they're already 0-4 and kind of looking like they're going to be in that spot just because they're in a rebuild. But I think they got to love what they're getting out of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yes, absolutely. I like their young team. They're rebuilding. They've had some big playoff runs. It's rebuild, get some new young players in there, and make a run. In the next few years. But Golden State, I talked about them before the season started. They could very well, make a run back at it this year. They could go back to the championship, and they don't even have, the other Splash brother at the moment. So
Klay Thompson.
Yeah, Klay Thompson, and they're 4-0 right now. Curry's been doing what he needs to do, and so has Draymond Green in that game. 8 points, but 1 block. So Green's a force on the court, and even when they're all getting a little bit older, but they're still productive. I like Andrew Wiggins, 21 points. Curry, of course, just above him with 23 points. That's good. That's a well combined team. And then you have that guy coming off the bench. What was his name? I think his name is Lee. Yeah, Lee coming off the bench with 20 points. I think if you add another bench player like that, maybe Iguodala can shake off the arthritis one more season and play good, and then you add Thompson into that mix. This team already looks dangerous, and then you add the matter of Klay Thompson in there, and if he's as good as he was when he went out, the guy, I remember when he went out, he got hurt. He tore an ACL, wherever he came back and shot the free throws.
Right, yeah.
Achilles, something like he shot the free throws and didn't left, and he wanted to be taken out of the game.
Right. But now we got to move on. A few more games here on the schedule. Mavericks go 2-1 now. 1-3 Rockets, 10-point win. Doncic 26 points, 14 rebounds. Christian Wood though for Houston, 16 points with 17 rebounds. A good game for him. Lakers go to overtime against the Spurs. They win at 125. 121. Anthony Davis, 35 points, 17 rebounds for him. A triple-double, though, for DeJounte Murray, 21 points, 12 rebounds, 15 assists. I think a lot of upside for the Spurs. They still haven't put it together. And Lakers now back-to-back winners after losing their first two. They seem to start clicking a little bit. And Jazz last night, they start now 3-0. Nuggets fall to 2-2, 122-110. Jokic, 24 points. And Rudy Gobert, 23 points, 16 rebounds for him. NBA's got a lot of big stuff coming their way. But unfortunately, we are out of time. Cleveland Cavaliers take on the Clippers tonight. Matt, any last-minute thoughts for that one?
Yeah, it should be a good game.
I think I got Cleveland.
Yeah,
I think Cleveland in this one.
They might take it. They're clicking. I like their chemistry. I like Ricky Rubio as at the point guard. He great assist master. Okay. So that's all I got.
I guess we're safe, but that's going to do it here for the Casual Sports Podcast. YSN Live presents Power Hour coming up next on YSN, obviously. But thank you all for tuning in. I've been Alec Caberna.
I've been Matt Morrison.
That's Matt Morrison right there. We're going to see you all next time.